Good evening once again, ladies and gentlemen, and interestingly enough, you may have picked up on the fact over the last number of videos that I've been doing, I've had something of a very interested and sort of very invested investigation into, wow, that didn't sound redundant at all, that did it? I've looked into exactly the presentation of how people who are unemployed are viewed on TV, because there is a very it's a very controversial topic, because there is a lot of variation and there's a lot of angles you could come across. For example, why do unemployed people volunteer to go on shows like, Benefits Britain or Life on the Dole or anything like that? Many people would, and even in one of the most historic cases, that was the Jeremy Kyle show, which I'm glad to say came to an end almost coming up to 4 years next month. Now, what I find actually very interesting about this is that it's the angle we're going to be taking a look at today, because this was taken from an episode of Newsnight about in 2014. Yeah, because I didn't know Jeremy Paxman was... He didn't retire from Newsnight until 2015, I believe. And also, since Jeremy Paxman's tenure on University Challenge is coming to an end in a matter of weeks. I mean... It's when you think of broadcasters that have stayed with people for generations, and not to mention Paxman's ear for his craft and how he conducts himself, and he tries to make people just answer the simple questions. And Paxman has even gone on to admit that sometimes he does sort of want to trip people up, because he wants to make sure that the truth comes out of people. And for what I do know about Jerry Springer is that I think he worked for, I don't remember exactly what station. I don't know if it was like the Fox network or maybe it was for PBS or something like that. Then he got into politics, and then he did the Jerry Springer show. And I honestly don't ever remember actually anything about watching the Jerry Springer show. It's not really the sort of thing people actually get up for when it comes to the stuff that... But people know exactly what Springer's all about. And... we're going to see exactly what happens when you collide these two broadcasting juggernauts against each other. So, and also, by the way, for anyone out there who's never actually seen Jerry Springer or Jeremy Paxman, you're going to be in for something quite a treat, I hope for. Anyway, let's go.
Thank you both. Now, the broadcasting regulator Ofcom says it's going to investigate the Channel 4 programme Benefit Street after receiving the best part of 2,000 complaints. Yet the programme yielded Channel 4 their biggest audience for the best of 2 years. It's more evidence of the way in which a particular type of portrayal of poor people on television has become immensely popular. The procession of unfortunate, feckless or addicted people on the Jeremy Kyle show on ITV, for example, reflects the same taste. The old injunction about a special care or reverence for the poor seems to have been shunted aside by a taste for the freak show.
There was a time not so long ago when the two people you could really rely upon when you needed them were your grandparents.
Not so long ago, the daytime talk show was a rather sedate affair, a place for distinctly careful gassing about the business of the day, and perhaps a little general discussion on such saucy topics as relationships. Then this happened. The Jerry Springer Show and others like it found huge ratings success in the 1990s with an increasingly unashamed brand of lurid personal confession and confrontation between protagonists.
Thank you, welcome back. My next guests say they have double the trouble.
At his show's peak, this politician turned journalist turned ringmaster was presenting to millions of viewers in 50 countries worldwide, and even spawned a foul-mouthed opera in his tribute.
The only thing I kind of want to say to this right now is that usually when I hear that, people do things in tribute, you sort of do it under the impression that something has died, and therefore the thing to do is to remember what it was famous for better or worse. And unfortunately, again, you're not really going to see like a Jeremy Kyle opera anytime soon, because if you are going to do something like a Jeremy Kyle opera, then it would be pulled before you even begin. Because to be honest, even I could probably actually do a pretty good job at writing, let's say, Jeremy Kyle the opera or Jeremy Kyle, or it's called the Jeremy Kyle musical. Yeah, that should be a working title, actually. It's called the Jeremy Kyle musical. And it's about, like, literally, like, this megalomaniac, and he has, like, Graham or Big Steve and that, and he, like, pulls the strings, and you get them to do exactly what they want. But that's, for the most part, I actually do want to say a lot of things about Paxman's opinions are absolutely true, because it's been, even when I was unemployed, I never ever watched daytime telly. It was, quite frankly, and I don't want to, like, overstep the mark, but beneath my dignity, that there were much better things and much more important things to draw my attention to than, the Jeremy Kyle show, for example, even though that went off the air a full year before the troubles really began. Anyway.
The airing of Dirty Washing on national television format has found notable success on these shores too. The Jeremy Kyle show, once branded human bear baiting.
In fact, again, that's been one of the most famous quips that's ever been taglined with, maybe that should be the subtitle, human bear baiting in the flesh, or something like that. Anyway, human bear baiting is one of the biggest things that this show has been, like, criticised and called by a high magistrate judge. Because I remember that Channel 4 for 2 nights, they actually did Jeremy Kyle a death on daytime TV. And they actually did interview the judge who presided over the case. And I think, among other things, he presided over the case of people who got into legal troubles afterwards as a result of the show. Meanwhile, I was watching, you have been watching this morning with Charlie Brooker and Frankie Boyle, and Charlie Brooker also issued that it was a human form of bear baiting, but then Charlie Brooker also added, which in many ways is not entirely accurate, because it's actually quite funny to watch bears die. But then again, as sick and a bit twisted as that is, do you think for 1 minute, if they took Cocaine Bear, for example, and they put another bear and made them fight, it would be like a rating success, because it says, wow, look at these two bastards go. What's the difference when we pit animals against each other versus we put people that we condescend and patronize to the state of animals too?
Is now approaching its 10th year.
Unemployed.
And more recently, Channel 4's Benefit Street triggered a national slanging match over whether the travails of poor people should be a source of entertainment.
Why, if he wants to be with you, why is he living with her?
So what does one of the founding fathers of the human goldfish bowl, a devoted liberal and humanitarian in his private life apparently, think about the monster he helped to create? Well, Jerry Springer, the godfather of the confessional chat show, is here. Are you ashamed of it?
The show's stupid, but I've always thought the show's stupid. Ashamed not.
Shouldn't you be?
No, not any more than a journalist should be doing the news. Because, for example, you would make a living. Let's say you're a journalist. Let's say you do the news every night. Every night you tell stories about very bad things, and it's very profitable for the station. You're not necessarily helping the people you talk about. Newspapers are in that business all the time.
Yeah,
You could decide only to put well-scrubbed, wealthy people that speak the Queen's English on television and just do that. But that wouldn't reflect the whole society.
You're being facetious, aren't you?
No, I think television, I'm dead serious. Let me finish. Television should reflect, in a free society, the entire culture. If all shows were like mine, that would be wrong. But you can't just have television that is like Friends, Seinfeld, all these wealthy people, good-looking people, and you...
Okay, there's actually quite a lot to unpack here, because if I'm being completely honest right here, absolutely, I 100% agree on this. Because, and again, remember this is back in 2014, I think, when they did this. 9 years later, let's think about this. in a free society, as he calls, but unfortunately, people have caught on for the fact that nothing in life is free, and I say that very regularly about, like, for example, one of my biggest pet peeves, and one of the things I go on the hunt about, is freedom of the press, or rather, what the press do to express their views on things. And I do go after the left wing newspapers. I absolutely do. I'm not biased. I will literally target anyone who pretends to feed me bullshit. If there's something out there that I'm actually very, very skeptical on because of its presentation, you go after it immediately. And by the way, this isn't something you just learn for when you do like a university course, or you spend 3 hours learning about journalism on Skillshare. This is the sort of thing you learn when you're about 15 to 16 years old in English language classes at GCSE level. And bizarrely enough, and again, if it sounds like I'm dragging this, then I just want to make this clear, is that, again, my biggest criticism of the concept of freedom of the press is that if you have to pay for something, is it free? And this is where the curiosity really begins to set in place, because whether it's a newspaper or whether it's a website, if it comes up saying allow all cookies, you may as well be paying for a copy of a newspaper, because you're giving it could be the Daily Mail, it could be the Guardian, it could be the Independent. You're giving them what they want. They want to know exactly what you are, and they want to know about the things that they can market to you. They want to know how they can pander to your attention, and they will do it by constantly throwing things at you that will make you think that is what you will believe in. Because how many of us go through our day-to-day lives and we believe the things that we're told about? And again, this is why it's so important that I do a sweepstake of every published British newspaper, including The Sun, including The Sport, which calling it a newspaper is a bit, that's being a bit generous, all things considered. But you know what? They put it out there, and that's what it is. And again, calling it a newspaper literally is, again, really, really pushing it. But the thing I kind of wanted to really get at when we're talking about all this, and when we're going to have to move forward, is that a lot of these papers, in fact, all of them, do not reflect the whole society. Collectively, they still don't reflect the whole of society, whether it's, 10 people living crammed in a freezing cold flat somewhere in Middlesbrough, or whether it's about the wealthiest allegorical members of society who, and I say allegorical because there's there are some news things about a lot of members of the Conservative Party, maybe not all of them, and again, this is just the things that were brought out, and you could even argue that the only way I would say Conservative in the first place is because maybe, they seem to pander to the idea that I think all is needed is to repeat #Tories out, just so we prove their point. But I'll get back to all that in a second, because as I've said for a while now, the mantra this time last year, in my opinion, was not to be pro-Labour, but to be anti-Tory. And literally a whole 12 months has passed, and I see no reason why that has literally changed at all. I still absolutely, to this day, I think that is absolutely the way of things. It's not about being pro-Labour, it's about being anti-Tory. And yeah, I still back that entirely. And again, what happens again when you present people who are not like Friends or Seinfeld or Top Gear, for example?
If some wealthy, famous person goes on television and talks about who he or she has been sleeping with, we can't get enough of it. We cheer them. But if it's some person of low income, all of a sudden we say trash, trash, like they're less than a wealthy
for
person.
Yourself. Lots of us choose not to watch either.
Well, then you're not in the business. Then you do watch television. Are you saying here that you don't watch television, Jeremy? Of course you watch television.
I'm not interested in who's sleeping with whom.
I'm not either. I watch sports. But, so I'm not. I don't watch my show. And I've always said that. If I was in college, I would. When I was in college, I'd get a hoot out of it. But I'm saying we shouldn't be too uppity and say that if these shows show poor people, it's trash.
It's not
but if
that-
it's rich people, it's okay.
It's not that it shows poor people, it's that it exploits poor people.
I disagree.
Well,
I
I guess,
think it-
again, maybe what we could be getting into here is the definition of exploitation. Because in my opinion, the idea's exploitation literally comes down to one very simple principle: is if you're getting more out of something than you are putting into it. That, in my opinion, that's exploitation. You're basically getting a lot of things without having to put nearly as much effort into it as what is what it's giving out, basically. So, in my opinion, that's exploitation, because you're trading on even things that have no value or profit, or at least things that are not economical, like love or hatred or truth or justice. You can't make money on those things, but you can force people to shovel those things in your favor. And all you have to do is literally sit back and watch.
The news for 10 years. I was a journalist for 10 years. That was exploitation. And I'll tell you why. Never once was there a conversation in the newsroom that we should drop a story because this story might hurt this person, ruin their career, ruin their marriage, or cause them discomfort. We never cared about the people we did stories on.
Well, you were
on
working in
our
a
show,
rubbish newsroom then, weren't you?
Actually, no, Paxman, no. It's all stations all over the world, whether it's Al Jazeera, the BBC, Fox, CBS, NBS, ABC, all of them all over the world do this, because it's the objective of the news is not to tell people what to think about it. The objective end goal to any news coverage is simply just to tell people what's going on. That's literally the beginning, the middle, and end of the story. And bear in mind, one of the things, again, a lot of people point out in terms of like newspapers, and even that half-assed manifesto I wrote a couple of months ago about wanting to outlaw newspapers only on the grounds that it would actually save thousands of trees, it would save thousands in ink, it would save a lot of cost, and we move all things digitally. And a large objective to that is that you'd have to sort of wonder again, like the circulate. Well, it's not so much the circulation, but at the same time, whenever you're reading something that has a conflict of interest, it has its own personal agenda about why it does the things it does. The Daily Express, the Daily Telegraph, the Daily Mail, the Times, they've been doing this sort of thing for years. They will write stories they use very specific terms of language to play upon people's feelings, so that the spin they put on it's the classic Wheeler case when Prohibition was first introduced, is that he played into people's fears and emotions by saying that hardworking Americans were literally just ruining their lives and families, and that poor migrants from Ireland or Lithuania were literally just coming to exploit the people who were that put them in charge. And what we have here, ladies and gentlemen, is again one of those cases that, if honestly, how many people, if you read the news, how many times do you think to themselves, they go home and think about the things that they just say on the news, as though to them this is just like another day at the office? And unfortunately, one of the things that this current government really dislike the BBC about is when they do actually have political agendas. Just look at Gary Lineker. He has his own agenda. In fact, his agenda is, I personally agree that everybody who works at the BBC, from the lowest to the highest, everybody's agendas and opinions should be as equal as each other. And you got all this mantra about saying that Lineker's a sports presenter. What does he know about politics? They kept trying to put him down and try and discredit his account of things, because Lineker had touched upon their weak spot, and he went to places that no like political editor would from the BBC would ever think about, because quite a lot of political editors for any station, ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5, the BBC, it's not so much that they're too squirmish to openly say the things they want to say, but because regulators would pull it immediately. And again, that's where the ideas like freedom of speech and freedom of the press is, because what happens, again, when you start telling people what they can and cannot say? And who are we supposed to feel for then? Because it only takes one person to say something, to be pro or against something, and then people draw to the wildest conclusions, and nobody is going to curb their freedom of speech there. I wouldn't know. I've seen a lot of this at close quarters, and but the problem is that, again, they're in the people who shouldn't be using that sort of language. They're in positions very, very apart from the people who do use the language that maybe shouldn't. So which one really do you think is the fool? The person who is not a liar, but somebody who, if he said the truth, he'd literally be hung, drawn, and quartered on live television, or the person who has no real barriers or no real morals just in terms of guilt or shame, and he will just say exactly plain speaking and say anything that will come to his mind.
I've been party to those conversations many a time.
You're telling me when you run a story on the BBC that puts someone in a bad light, you ask their permission first?
No,
that's not true,
not
Jeremy.
ask their permission. That wasn't what you said. A conversation saying, is this going to be damaging to the person? That conversation was certainly...
And did you ever then say, if it's damaging to the person, you won't run the story? And you don't run the story?
It's happened many a time.
That's not true. Come on.
It's happened many a time.
News always, if it's a good story, if it's a big headline...
Certainly one thing I will absolutely say about Jerry Springer is that during the debacle where the Right Honourable Nedihim Sahari failed to disclose that he had unpaid debt taxes in £3 million of unpaid taxes, the BBC actually pulled a stupid by not deciding to make it one of the top headlines about for their news of the day. And this happened about 3 or so months ago when this all happened. It was during roughly about the same time as the Turkey and Syria earthquakes, I should add. And this is something that, again, you kind of have to understand, is that maybe it's just because it was but then again, a lot of other people were talking about it, and it doesn't look good when, and you could say whether or not the BBC just, they didn't have enough to go on, or somebody was actively trying to quell the BBC to not publish or make much of this story unless they couldn't possibly help it. Because, again, when you don't bring attention to these sorts of things, again, think about how bad it looks from a newspaper or a journalist whose speciality is to cover stories like these, and they're almost nowhere to be seen. Their reputation goes out the window immediately, and even if you're just starting as a journalist, you might never get a job on any paper ever again after that.
No one ever said, for example, well, we got this Bill Clinton story and with the young girl, let's not run it. It's going to hurt his marriage. It's going to hurt the family.
That's got clear political significance.
How did it affect anybody's life
from dysfunctional
other than
families.
his own family? How did O.J. Simpson,
because
all the coverage of O.J.
Simpson lying is a public matter.
Why did covering O.J. Simpson for 2 years? Now, I admit it, I can only speak in America, so I don't know how much coverage you got here in England, in Great Britain. But in America, for 2 years, news covered O.J. Simpson. It didn't affect anybody's life except the people.
Okay, you've got me there. You've got me there. I mean, there was live coverage of the O.J. Simpson trial.
Following the car.
In my view, a disgrace.
Yes.
But because it had no significance.
Yes.
But your show doesn't have any significance. You admit that?
No, it doesn't affect me. But I do think it matters to the people that are on it. Otherwise, they wouldn't call to be on.
Why
it may
do they
only
come
be
on?
dating. I think the reason is, the quick answer everyone always gives is, oh, they want their Andy Warhol 15 minutes of fame. That's glib and it's incorrect. these people don't become famous. They don't even use their real names. We let them wear disguises. So it's not to become famous. They come on, a lot of them, not all, because for 1 week in their lives, someone is listening to them. In other words, they don't have kids who listen to them, many of these folks. They don't have parents who listen to them. They don't have a job where someone asks their opinion. Every day you come to work, someone's saying, Jeremy, what do you think we ought to do?
That's bloody tragic if that's why they come on your
And
show.
actually, it's it is that's the thing, people. And again, maybe this relates more about to the programs about like Benefits Britain or all of those programs. Is that it literally can be just a case of finally somebody is giving them sort of a bit of attention. Maybe not to say anything extravagant or significant or significance, but just to showcase to the world that they are on this planet as well, that they still exist. And maybe just there's a lot of other angles to this, and I will go on a limb in here and say that I don't think it's all of the cases about that people just want to hear their problems and stuff like that. But again, the thing about people going on the show and they don't become famous, I can relate to that. And again, going back to the Jeremy Kyle show for 1 second, there are people that go on who are so utterly notorious. There's, I think, one lady from Liverpool, I think she's called something King, and she's been on like on the Jeremy Kyle show 10 times, and she's also like been on many of those Benefits Britain programs as well, where they're through Liverpool, among other I wish there was a really, really polite way of putting this, but you know what? I would actively consider going to those places just to know exactly what it's like at close quarters, or to at least talk to someone who's been on those programs, because I generally sort of almost want to know why. I would even, you know what? I'll tell you what. I've got an even better idea. Hang on. Hang on a second, guys. Let's see. If I go to Channel 5 right now, because I think like this is sort of like one of those stations where you could sort of account on the fact, aside from the fact that I'm watching the documentary about the Tower of London, but also about, all creatures great and small, but this might be another one. I'm going to try this one more time just to be on a show, just to see what happens. Phone scams, don't get caught out. That's a show you could be on. The Pet Psychic, Rich House, Poor House, The Great Auction Showdown with Paul Martin, Eggheads. Oh yeah, I forgot Eggheads is on Channel 5 now. The Hotel Inspector, Nick Knowles, Big No, Skin A&E, no, Dogs Behaving Very Badly. No, okay, fair enough. I don't know whether or not just Channel 5 don't do those sort of programs anymore, but well, actually, it might be a good point as to why they don't do it anymore, because they don't seem to be doing too many of them nowadays.
Well, for 1 week, it's easy for us to say because we're lucky in life. And every day someone's asking me, whether it's my daughter, whether it's my wife, someone's always asking me, people at work, what do I think about this? I go on a show and give my opinion. No one ever asks these people anything. And now for 1 week, they get picked up, they get taken to an airport, some of them first time they've ever been on a plane, they get taken to a show, they come out there, people are cheering. And it's not important to you and me, and we don't deal with serious issues on our show. We don't do pregnancy tests, we don't do that. On our show, we just do who they're dating, and tomorrow they're cheating. And
well,
so
that's certainly very interesting, but then again, I don't really think, did they ever do like lie detectors on the Jerry Springer show? Because I somehow don't think really they did. They did do a lot of lie detectors in the UK, even though we know absolutely they are not 100% accurate and therefore inadmissible in a court of law. And again, it's probably for the better that they didn't do serious issues again on the Jerry Springer show, because legally, I think it would have been more than Springer or whatever side that the show was on in the US.
Someone else the next day. So it's not life-changing, but what it is, and I noticed, because when the show's over, most of the people on my show I really kind of like. Not everyone, but most of them, they just didn't get the breaks in life that I get. They didn't have wonderful parents, or they weren't born maybe with a good brain, or they weren't born with the luck that I've had. So, but they're not bad human beings. They want to be happy. They say, Jerry, what's a good restaurant to go here in New York? Or would you hold my kid while we take a picture? Their language isn't as good as ours, but they're not less. I'm telling you, if you think, and I'm not suggesting you do, but if one thinks that wealthy, powerful people have cornered the market on virtue, like they don't cheat, they don't do bad things in life, that's just wrong.
No one suggests that for a second, least of all, as I hope.
Yep.
But thank you very much, Jerry Springer. Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks.
That's all we have time for tonight. Good night.
It's strange as well that Paxman literally wanted to end that so quickly. It's almost as if like he had like a real epiphany as well for seeing this in a different light, and you do get that quite a lot on, well, not always on Newsnight. I will remind you of one notorious incident on Newsnight when I think it was like 2005 when Jeremy Paxman was interviewing then leader of the Conservative Party, Michael Howard, and he asked him the same question 14 times, and Michael Howard, I think, gave a different answer every single time. He just, and again, that's the sort of journalist, broadcaster that Paxman was during his time, and it's even here right now, Paxman Michael Howard interview, and it was from '97, okay. Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, 97. Okay. God, who was leader of them in 2005? I'll have to think about that. Anyway, the point I just wanted to come across as well is that one thing I will always back, and it's not just because of the evidence of what I've just seen here tonight. One thing I will always back those who have been ever, down and out in the world is that you can tell that they don't. How many people out there do you probably really think they want to be in that position? It's nobody ever wakes up one morning and really honestly tells themselves, I wish I was poorer. I wish my friends were poorer. I wish that, I had to walk outside and see dogs shit all over the place. People literally have no manners or respect, and it's just a grimy, very awful place in the world to be in. Nobody ever actually wants to be in that position. Nobody actually ever wishes for anything like that. But again, the reality of the matter is this, is that I've worked in a place in the Northeast for the last 3 years now. It's not by all accounts the nicest place in the world. It's not the cleanest place in the world. And that's just talking about the scenery, because the place in which I work in is a place called Wallsend, and it's, as somebody once famously put it to me, Wallsend is a place where people just exist and nothing else. It's like it just grew out of the earth, and people just decided, okay, we'll make this into a town. And once again, I'll just put it to you guys again. It's not the best place in the world to be in. It's not the best place in the world, full stop. But to be honest with you, it's not as if the people there, the people are not the. Again, I don't think they're the greatest people in the world, the people who live there. But the people where I live I don't think are the greatest people in the world either. But the difference being, ladies and gentlemen, is again, one thing I always put it to you guys is that in British society, at the very least, class distinction is only ever governed by one thing: money. And that is, in my opinion, that's the end of the story. And because when you make it about money, it's the single fastest way of making yourself understood. It's the fastest way of letting yourself be known. It's the fastest way to also let other people know where they belong. And it's also the fastest way to making sure that you will never be interfered with again, because you can call a policeman and you can get someone done for interfering with you just because you don't like the look of them. But again, and I wish there was a really nice way to put this as well, because it's not. I think also the companies that do like the benefits on Britain shows, I think they know fully well this as well, but they will still go out and do it anyway, because they know they prey on the fact that there's no hope for these people. And it's, why is it, again, on, for example, you never hear like raving reviews, or, you know, these sorts of shows are not talked about for years and years afterwards. It's because, aside from the fact that they are extremely formulaic, many reality shows like them are basically the case. However, what happens, ladies and gentlemen, and what happens is that so often we become so numb that we know fine well poverty exists, and we know fine well, and again, a rich man who claims to be intellectually honest usually would say something like this: we know that poverty is unpleasant. In fact, because it's so remote from what we experience, we enjoy fantasizing of the thoughts of its very unpleasantness. But don't expect us to do anything about it. We are sorry for you lower classes, in the same way that we are sorry for a cat with a mange, but we will fight and toil like devils for any improvements of your condition. We feel that you are much safer as you are, and we're not going to have the risk of setting you free, even by an extra hour a day. So, dear brothers, since you must sweat evidently in order to pay for our trips to Italy, sweat and be damned to you. It stems from a case what's referred to as fear of the mob. And as you might well imagine, a lot of, ever since, again, this interview and ever since the Jeremy Kyle show, regulations have seemed to have swung very far into the the right-wing direction, I should say. Because they say, you know, one of the ads is that it's 20 times more likely to be called as a benefit cheat, but all you have to do is literally avoid paying tax for £3 million, and you don't even face a prison sentence. You don't face a court summons, a court hearing. And that's one of the things so many people get riled about, and why there is such a surge to topple these people, because they know exactly what they think of people like us, and they know exactly what they think is the only way to, you know, calm them down and to soothe them, by giving them some form of attention, as though we were like neglected little puppies, and that was the only way, as if, you know, we've given you attention, there you are, that's like one problem sorted. I mean, again, just taking the whole, I'll get to the end of this in a second, but just take about the problems of revolving around the migrants, and the way that literally the only solution people seem to come up with is fly them all the way to Rwanda and put them into what looks like concentration camps. There's no way of getting around it. And I said from the very beginning that it was the most barbaric and the most sinister approach you can have, because there is a nasty out of sight, out of mind attitude to all this. And who's to say that before long they start shipping off people, English people in our prisons, off to Rwanda, for example? Who's to say that it's like it's like being exiled to Siberia is what it almost amounts to. As though, you know, like I said, if you abolish the logic some people follow is that if you abolish migrants, you abolish poverty. But all this talk, you see, is surprisingly going to lead to very small results, because people and myself think it's a very inhumane thing to do. Many people say that many of the things that these people do that are warranting being sent down to Rwanda is very inhumane. I don't exactly know why they can't be in their own prisons, but again, call it what you will. And the problem we all face, ladies and gentlemen, is that whenever anything like this happens, again, who do you think is going to pay for all the fuel that is going to be used to fly people out to Rwanda? Who's going to pay for the ticket? You guessed it, ladies and gentlemen. It's a vicious circle that's designed to keep poor people poor and the rich to get even richer. And who do the rich get rich of? The poor. That, ladies and gentlemen, is exploitation in its bleakest but brightest form. That's exactly what exploitation looks like. Meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, to just conclude this video, there is a calling, ladies and gentlemen, for representation to be taken seriously. But if it means selling your soul or selling any right you have to express any sort of opinion whatsoever for the world to see, if you're jeopardizing a person's freedoms, then it is no doubt that there is also a freedom to revolt that.